What if a simple piece of paper held the key to a treasure worth over $60 million, hidden somewhere in the mountains of Virginia, and no one has ever cracked the code? For over 200 years, cryptographers, treasure hunters, and even the FBI have tried ... and failed. Today, we're rediving deep into the unsolved mystery of the Beale Ciphers, America's most tantalizing hidden treasure code. A short cinematic introduction setting the tone, mysterious, historical, and analytical. Introduce Thomas J. Beale, the 19th century adventurer who allegedly buried the treasure, and the mysterious coded papers that remain unsolved to this day. Then transition into the problem: why no one has managed to decode the two remaining ciphers. Imagine the early 1800s. America was young, restless, and filled with promise. The frontier stretched endlessly westward, whispering tales of fortune and freedom. It was an era of gold rush dreams, daring adventures, and the kind of mystery that could only be born in a land not yet tamed. Amid this backdrop, one man's story would transcend the boundaries of myth and history. Thomas Jefferson Beale. His name would go on to haunt cryptographers, historians, and treasure hunters for over 2 centuries. But who was he? And how did his name become forever tied to what is now called America's greatest hidden treasure code? Thomas J. Beale is said to have been a bold frontiersman, a man of striking presence and commanding charm. Records about him are vague, almost ghost-like, as if history itself conspires to keep his identity uncertain. Around 1817, Beale and a small group of fellow adventurers set out from Virginia, heading westward into the unexplored territories of the American frontier. Their mission was simple: to seek opportunity, perhaps fortune, or maybe just adventure. What they discovered, according to legend, was something far beyond their imagination. In the remote hills of what is now New Mexico, Beale's group allegedly stumbled upon a vast vein of gold and silver. Imagine that moment, the flash of gold in the riverbed, the stunned silence that follows, and then the overwhelming realization that they had found unimaginable wealth buried beneath the earth. Over time, they mined an immense fortune, thousands of pounds of gold, silver, and jewels, enough to make each man richer than the wildest dreamer of the age. But the frontier was dangerous. Bandits roamed freely, governments were unstable, and law enforcement barely reached those distant lands. Carrying that treasure home was a risk no sane man would take lightly. Beale decided to do something extraordinary. Rather than flaunt their newfound wealth, he chose secrecy. He and his men carefully transported the treasure across the country, through perilous mountain trails and harsh weather, until they reached Virginia once more. There, in the quiet countryside of Bedford County, Beale found a secluded spot, a place known only to him and his companions, where they buried their fortune deep within the earth. But Beale wasn't reckless. He knew that if something happened to him or his men, their secret would die with them. To safeguard the treasure and ensure it could one day be recovered, he devised a plan, one that would turn his story into one of the greatest mysteries in American history. Beale encoded the exact location of the treasure, the contents of what was buried, and the names of those involved into 3 separate ciphered messages. He then placed these coded papers inside a locked iron box. Sometime later, Beale checked into an inn in Lynchburg, Virginia, owned by a man named Robert Morrises. Beale and Morrises struck up a friendship, and before leaving on what would become his final journey, Beale entrusted Morrises with the locked box. He told him that if he did not return within 10 years, Morrises was to open the box and follow the instructions inside. Beale then disappeared, never to be seen again. You can imagine Morrises' confusion when the 10 years passed and Beale failed to return. He waited, hoping for word, but none came. Finally, curiosity and perhaps a sense of obligation got the better of him. He opened the box and found the 3 ciphered documents, lines and lines of numbers, seemingly random, incomprehensible, but carrying within them the promise of unimaginable wealth. Alongside them was a brief letter explaining their purpose and the conditions for unlocking the secret. But there was one crucial element missing, the key to the ciphers. For years, Morrises struggled to make sense of the papers. The numbers taunted him, mocking his efforts as he tried and failed to uncover their meaning. The stress reportedly consumed him, and in his old age, before his death, he handed the papers to a friend, hoping someone else might succeed where he had failed. That anonymous friend later published the story and the ciphers, igniting a treasure-hunting frenzy that has never truly ended. And that is where the legend of the Beale Ciphers truly begins, a tale of gold and mystery of cryptic numbers that might point to a treasure buried deep beneath Virginia soil. But the story of Thomas Beale himself remains as elusive as the treasure he is said to have hidden. No solid historical record proves his existence beyond the account tied to the ciphers. Some say he was a fictional creation meant to lend credibility to a hoax. Others believe he was a real man, part explorer and part enigma, whose story was swallowed by time. Yet whether he lived or not, the world he represents feels hauntingly real. A time when the promise of fortune could lure men into the wild unknown, when secrecy meant survival, and when a few sheets of coded numbers could hold the key to a lifetime's worth of riches. The legend of Thomas J. Beale captures that tension perfectly, the eternal human drive to seek what's hidden, to solve what's unsolved, and to find meaning in the mysteries left behind. After Thomas J. Beale vanished into history, the true weight of his secret rested in the hands of one man, Robert Morris, the innkeeper of Lynchburg. When Morris finally pried open the iron box, his hands trembling, he found what appeared to be nothing more than 3 sheets of paper filled with long columns of numbers. Thousands of them, random, chaotic, meaningless, at least at first glance. But what Morris held was no ordinary puzzle. These numbers represented one of the most enduring mysteries in American history, the Beale Ciphers, a code so complex that even 2 centuries later, it remains unsolved. Each page, as described by those who saw it, contained lines of 3-digit numbers arranged neatly into paragraphs. No letters, no punctuation, no clues. Just a sea of numbers stretching endlessly, each one a potential key to unimaginable wealth. Alongside these ciphers was Beale's brief letter, which explained that the papers together revealed the story of a hidden treasure. But there was a catch. Only one of the 3 ciphers could be read without the proper key. And without that key, the treasure would remain lost forever. According to Beale's letter, the first cipher described the precise location of the buried treasure, the exact spot somewhere in Bedford County, Virginia, where gold, silver, and jewels worth millions lay hidden beneath the soil. The second cipher listed the contents of the treasure in detail, and the third contained the names of Beale's companions and their heirs, so the fortune could one day be returned to the rightful families. The problem was simple but cruel. The letter did not include the key to any of these codes. Beale claimed to have left the key in the hands of a trusted friend in St. Louis who would send it to Morris's after 10 years. But that friend, whoever he was, never came forward. The key never arrived. So Morris's was left with numbers that could change his life if only he could make sense of them. For 20 years he tried everything. He compared the numbers to the Bible, to local maps, to military codes, even to letters of the alphabet. Nothing worked. The numbers refused to yield their secret. They seemed to mock him with their complexity. Over time, the obsession consumed him, and the mystery became his burden. He passed away never knowing what those papers truly held. Years later, Morris's friend, the anonymous man who would later publish the Beale Papers, took up the challenge. He too struggled for years without progress, until one day he made a breakthrough. By sheer luck, he discovered that the second cipher, the one describing the contents of the treasure, could be decoded using a very specific key, the Declaration of Independence. By assigning each number to a word in the document, and then taking the first letter of that word, he slowly began to form readable text. And what emerged from the code was astonishing. It read, in part, "I have deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Befords, in an excavation or vault, 6 feet below the surface of the ground, the following articles." The message then went on to describe the treasure: 2,921 pounds of gold, 5,100 pounds of silver, and a collection of precious jewels, all safely hidden in Virginia soil. The total value in today's money, over $60 million. That single deciphered message was enough to ignite a national obsession. If one cipher could be cracked, then surely the others could too. Treasure hunters, cryptographers, and scholars from all walks of life began to chase the mystery. They believed that the first cipher, the one revealing the exact location, might use the same method, but every attempt failed. When they tried to use the Declaration of Independence again, the numbers produced nonsense. Other texts, the Constitution, Shakespeare, the Bible, all led nowhere. The two remaining ciphers remained stubbornly silent. What's fascinating about these papers is their deceptive simplicity. On the surface, it's just a list of numbers: 115, 73, 497, 320, nothing unusual. But the structure is methodical, almost mathematical, suggesting deliberate construction. Some experts believe Beale used a book cipher, where each number corresponds to a specific word or letter in a key text. Others argue it's a complex transposition cipher, or perhaps even a layered system requiring multiple keys. Some have even proposed that Beale used a completely original encryption method, one that no one else in history has ever replicated. Over the years, computer algorithms, cryptographic models, and artificial intelligence have been used to study the patterns. None have succeeded in revealing a coherent message. And that raises an unsettling question. What if the ciphers were never meant to be solved? What if the numbers themselves were a smokescreen, a brilliant illusion crafted to hide something else entirely? Still, there's something irresistible about those 3 sheets of paper. They represent both promise and torment, the possibility of untold riches, and the frustration of being just one step away from unlocking them. Each generation of treasure hunters believes they'll be the one to finally break the code, to stand where Beale once stood, looking out over the Virginia hills, knowing the secret that no one else could grasp. The mystery of the cipher papers lies not only in their content but in their endurance. 2 centuries of past languages have evolved, technology has advanced, yet the numbers on those fragile pages remain defiant, untouched by time, whispering the same challenge they did in the 1820s. Find the key and the treasure is yours. When Thomas J. Beale walked into the Washington Hotel in Lynchburg, Virginia sometime around 1820, he seemed to be just another well-mannered traveler. He carried himself with quiet confidence, dressed like a man accustomed to the frontier, but educated enough to move easily among gentlemen. The innkeeper, Robert Morris, took note of his guest's calm composure and polite nature. Beale wasn't the kind of man who drew attention, but there was something about him, a weight in his demeanor, as if he carried secrets that others couldn't even imagine. For Morris's, that meeting would become the beginning of a mystery that would consume the rest of his life. Beale stayed at the inn for several months, living quietly, writing letters, and keeping largely to himself. He occasionally joined conversations with other travelers but revealed little about his background or his purpose in Lynchburg. Morris recalled that he was friendly yet reserved, someone who spoke when necessary but never more than needed. Then, without explanation, Beale vanished, only to return nearly a year later, this time looking far more intense and purposeful. He brought with him a small, heavy iron box, one that he treated with unusual care. He requested a private meeting with Morris's and handed him the box, asking him to keep it safe until his return. Beale explained that the contents of the box were of great importance and that Morris's should not attempt to open it unless he failed to come back within 10 years. If that happened, Beale said, a friend of his would send a letter containing instructions and a key that would make sense of the box's contents. Morris's, curious but respectful, agreed. Beale thanked him warmly, shook his hand, and disappeared once again into history. At first, Morris thought little of it. Travelers came and went, and it wasn't uncommon for people to leave belongings in trusted hands. But months turned into years, and still no word came from Beale or his mysterious friend. Then 10 years passed, and silence remained. No letter arrived, no messenger appeared. The man who had seemed so confident and deliberate had simply vanished from existence. Haunted by curiosity, Morris finally gave in to temptation. He retrieved the box, its metal now aged and slightly rusted, and pried it open. Inside, he found a neatly folded letter and several pages covered in columns of numbers. Thousands of them. His pulse quickened as he read the letter. It was from Beale himself, written in clear, articulate language. The letter described a fortune beyond belief, gold, silver, and jewels buried somewhere in Bedford County. The letter claimed that the 3 sheets of numbers contained the secret to finding and identifying this treasure. The first page described the location, the second listed the contents, and the third held the names of the men who helped bury it. But without the key that Beale had promised to send, the numbers were meaningless. Morris tried everything he could think of. He studied the numbers by candlelight night after night, hoping they would somehow reveal their secret. He compared them to books, maps, and religious texts, searching for patterns that refused to appear. As the years wore on, the mystery began to gnaw at him. It wasn't just about the treasure anymore. It was about understanding. Why had Beale chosen him, an innkeeper, to hold this secret? Was it because he trusted Morris's honesty, or was it simply because he was a convenient bystander in Beale's story? Rumors began to circulate around Lynchburg that the innkeeper was in possession of a great secret. Some said he had gone mad, that he spent sleepless nights staring at papers filled with numbers, muttering to himself as he tried to make sense of them. Others believed he had already found the treasure and was pretending ignorance to keep fortune hunters away. But the truth, as we know it, is much sadder. Morris never cracked the code. The key never arrived, and whatever hope he had of fulfilling Beale's promise slowly faded with time. In his later years, burdened by the mystery he could never solve, Morris decided to share the story with a trusted friend, a man whose identity remains unknown to this day. He handed him the box, the ciphers, and the letter, explaining everything he knew. That anonymous friend took up the torch of curiosity and continued the search. After years of fruitless effort, he finally decided that if he couldn't solve the riddle, perhaps someone else could. In 1885, he published a pamphlet titled The Beale Papers, revealing the story of the treasure, Beale's letter, and the cipher texts. That pamphlet would forever immortalize both Beale and Morris. It transformed a small-town innkeeper into an unwitting figure of legend, a man chosen by fate to guard one of the greatest unsolved secrets in American history. Within weeks of its publication, word spread across the country. Newspapers, explorers, and adventurers all seized upon the story. Lynchburg became a place of intrigue, and Bedford County turned into a hunting ground for treasure seekers. Imagine Morris's frustration if he could have seen it. For decades, he had stared at those numbers, tortured by their silence, unaware that within them lay the clue that would eventually lead to partial discovery, the second cipher that could be decoded with the Declaration of Independence. He never knew that one piece of the puzzle could be solved, or that his story would outlive him by centuries. Robert Morris never sought fame or fortune. He was an ordinary man who found himself entangled in an extraordinary mystery, a puzzle that began with a simple act of trust. A man walked into his inn, handed him a locked box, and vanished, and in that moment, history shifted. From that quiet exchange between two strangers in a Virginia inn was born a legend that would inspire obsession, speculation, and countless expeditions. The innkeeper who once thought he was safeguarding a friend's belongings had unknowingly become the keeper of America's greatest unsolved code. When the Beale Papers were finally published in 1885, they spread like wildfire across America. Newspapers, treasure hunters, and curious minds all seized upon the mystery, 3 pages of seemingly random numbers that promised unimaginable fortune. But among the thousands who tried to break the code, only one person, the anonymous author of the pamphlet, claimed to have made any progress. His discovery was astonishing. Using the Declaration of Independence as the key, he managed to decipher the second of Beale's 3 mysterious papers. What emerged from that coded message shocked everyone who read it. It wasn't gibberish or coincidence. It was a coherent, detailed description of buried treasure. The decoded message told of gold, silver, and precious jewels buried in Bedford County, Virginia, about 4 miles from a place called Beaufort's. The wording was clear and straightforward, with Beale even noting how the treasure had been carefully packed into iron pots and covered with stones to protect it from the elements. The quantities were staggering: nearly 3,000 pounds of gold, over 5,000 pounds of silver, and a chest filled with sparkling jewels. It was a revelation that turned skepticism into obsession. If one of the 3 ciphers could be solved, the other 2 must surely contain the map and the names of the men involved. All that was needed now was the key. The problem was, no one had it. After the publication of the Beale Papers, amateur codebreakers and professional cryptographers alike threw themselves at the mystery. The first cipher, which supposedly revealed the treasure's exact location, became the primary target. Many assumed it would use the same method as the second cipher, the Declaration of Independence as the key. But when they tried that, the result was chaos. The letters formed nonsense words, broken fragments, and meaningless sequences. Some believed that perhaps a different version of the declaration had been used, maybe one with spelling variations or punctuation differences. But even when they tested every version they could find, the message refused to reveal itself. Others proposed that the first cipher might be based on a different text entirely. They tried the U.S. Constitution, the Magna Carta, the Bible, Shakespeare's works, even Masonic documents. Each attempt ended in failure. Every key produced nothing more than confusion. Some cryptanalysts began to suspect that the numbers themselves were flawed, perhaps copied incorrectly, when the pamphlet was printed or maybe altered intentionally to prevent anyone from finding the treasure. But that only deepened the mystery. The third cipher, the one said to contain the names of Beale's companions and their heirs, proved equally impenetrable. It used a similar structure of numbers but resisted all logical decoding attempts. For every breakthrough someone claimed, another researcher would disprove it. And as the decades passed, the mystery began to acquire a supernatural aura. Some whispered that the ciphers were cursed, that anyone who got too close to solving them would suffer misfortune. Others insisted the treasure had already been found long ago, and the codes were nothing but a decoy left behind to confuse seekers. By the early 20th century, the Beale ciphers had captured the attention of some of the world's best codebreakers. During World War I and World War II, when cryptography became a military science, analysts from both the American and British intelligence communities studied the ciphers out of curiosity. None succeeded. Even the FBI reportedly examined them in later years using advanced computational methods. Still, nothing. The two unsolved ciphers remained defiant, as though mocking every mind that dared to challenge them. But there was something undeniably elegant about the one cipher that had been cracked. Its structure proved that Beale was methodical, deliberate, and intelligent. The message's language was formal and precise, the kind you'd expect from a well-educated man of the early 1800s. That authenticity made it difficult to dismiss the story as a hoax. If someone fabricated the entire thing, they went to extraordinary lengths to make it believable. And that, perhaps, is what keeps the legend alive, the perfect balance between plausibility and mystery. Over the years, countless theories have emerged to explain why the first and third ciphers remain unsolved. Some cryptographers believe that Beale might have used a completely different key text for each one, meaning that only one of them, the second, could be deciphered with the Declaration of Independence. Others suggest that the ciphers were intentionally scrambled, perhaps with transposition steps or encoded substitutions that make them far more complex than they appear. A few even speculate that Beale never used any book at all, that the numbers are symbolic or based on a personal algorithm known only to him. The difficulty of these codes has made them legendary in the cryptographic world. Modern computing power has been turned loose on them, running through billions of combinations in search of patterns, but so far the results remain inconclusive. Linguistic algorithms, frequency analysis, statistical modeling, every scientific tool imaginable has been applied. Yet the ciphers still hold their ground, silent and unbroken. There's an irony in all of this. The one cipher that was solved, the second, didn't reveal the treasure's location. It only confirmed that a treasure existed. It told everyone what to look for, but not where to find it. It was like a cruel joke, a riddle designed to stir the imagination, but stopped just short of revelation. Every treasure hunter since then has had to rely on rumor, guesswork, and intuition to fill in the blanks left by Beale's unsolved codes. That's what makes the Beale mystery so intoxicating. It sits at the intersection of mathematics, history, and myth. For some, it's an unsolved puzzle waiting for the right mind to crack it. For others, it's an elaborate 19th century hoax designed to sell pamphlets and stir adventure fever. Yet for those who still wander the woods of Bedford County with metal detectors and shovels, Those two unsolved ciphers remain a promise that somewhere deep underground Beale's secret still waits for someone clever enough to read the numbers that have defied the world for nearly 200 years. Every great mystery breeds 1,000 theories, and the Beale ciphers are no exception. For nearly 2 centuries, historians, cryptographers, and treasure hunters have argued over one fundamental question: is the treasure real, or is it all an elaborate hoax? Each theory pulls the story in a different direction, creating a web of speculation as complex as the codes themselves. Somewhere within that tangle of ideas may lie the truth, or perhaps just another illusion, waiting to lure the next curious mind deeper into the mystery. One of the most enduring theories is that the treasure itself truly exists, buried somewhere in the hills of Bedford County, Virginia, exactly as Beale's decoded message describes. Supporters of this view argue that the level of detail in the story is far too precise to be fiction. Beale's letter, the careful arrangement of the ciphers, and the tone of the language all point to a man who genuinely intended to preserve the secret of a real fortune. The second cipher, the one successfully decoded using the Declaration of Independence, reads like a legitimate document. It lists exact weights of gold and silver, the care taken to secure the vault, and the distance from recognizable landmarks like Beaufort's. This precision has convinced many that Beale was telling the truth. The treasure, they insist, is still there, waiting for someone to crack the remaining ciphers. Yet others argue that the entire saga is nothing more than a 19th century con, a brilliantly crafted hoax meant to stir excitement, sell pamphlets, and play on America's growing obsession with adventure and fortune. The pamphlet that first told the story was published in 1885, more than 60 years after Beale supposedly buried the treasure. No trace of Beale has ever been found in official records, no letters, no property deeds, nothing. To skeptics, this absence speaks volumes. They believe the anonymous author of the pamphlet, the so-called friend of Morris's, may have fabricated the story entirely, using Beale's name as a literary device to make the narrative believable. After all, the late 1800s were an era when tales of hidden gold and mysterious codes captivated the public imagination. A story like Beale's would have sold extremely well to an audience hungry for adventure. Then there's the linguistic evidence. Cryptanalysts who have studied the decoded portion of the second cipher claim that its writing style docent matched the time period it was allegedly written in. The phrasing and structure seemed too modern for the 1820s, suggesting that the pamphlet's author might have written the message himself rather than transcribing Beale's original words. That small discrepancy fuels one of the strongest arguments for the hoax theory. But even within the realm of skeptics, disagreement runs deep. Some believe that while the treasure itself might not exist, the ciphers could still conceal another kind of secret, perhaps a message, a hidden confession, or even a symbolic puzzle meant to test the limits of the human mind. A few have proposed that the Beale ciphers were part of a larger coded correspondence, one that might relate to Masonic traditions or secret societies of the time. The frequent references to loyalty, secrecy, and trust in Beale's letter have only deepened that suspicion. Was Beale really an adventurer, or was he safeguarding something else entirely? Another intriguing clue lies in the way the numbers are structured. The ciphers don't follow a completely random pattern. Some sequences repeat, suggesting there might be layers of encoding. In recent decades, digital analysis has revealed that the distribution of numbers seems intentional, as if Beale created his cipher with mathematical precision. Some experts have speculated that the first and third ciphers could require not just a single key, but multiple keys used in combination, perhaps even overlapping ciphers hidden within one. Another, if true, this would explain why all attempts using simple book ciphers have failed. Beale might have designed a system so sophisticated that it would take centuries for technology to catch up. Of course, the mystery wouldn't be complete without a few wild theories. Some treasure hunters claim the gold was found long ago by locals who kept it secret to avoid government seizure. Others insist that the entire story is connected to buried Confederate treasure or lost Spanish mines. There are even whispers that Beale's name itself is symbolic, an anagram, a cipher clue hidden in plain sight. And then there's the paranormal crowd who see the unsolved ciphers as cursed artifacts, claiming that misfortune has followed those who tried too hard to find the treasure? Despite endless debates, one fact remains unshakable. The Beale ciphers have withstood every effort to decode them. They have been analyzed by mathematicians, tested by supercomputers, and even examined by artificial intelligence models trained to recognize linguistic patterns, yet the message remains hidden. Every failed attempt only deepens the fascination. It's as if the ciphers are alive in some way, evolving with each generation that tries to conquer them. And perhaps that's the real genius of the Beale mystery. Whether the treasure is real or not, Beale succeeded in creating a story that captures humanity's endless hunger for discovery. We want to believe that somewhere out there, a fortune lies buried, waiting for the right person to find it. We want to believe that with enough patience, skill, and luck, we might be the one to break the code that no one else could. The ciphers speak to something universal, that irresistible pull toward the unknown. The thrill of a secret just out of reach, the idea that one small breakthrough could change everything. Theories will continue to grow, new clues will emerge, and skeptics will keep arguing with believers. But the mystery remains untouched, suspended in the space between truth and legend. Every number on those pages, every failed attempt, and every hopeful expedition adds to the legend's power. The Beale ciphers endure because they give us something few mysteries ever do. The promise that the answer is still out there, waiting, hidden beneath layers of numbers and centuries of doubt. As the 20th century turned into the 21st, the legend of the Beale ciphers refused to fade. Instead, it evolved. What began as a 19th century riddle passed down through whispered stories and printed pamphlets transformed into a global digital obsession. Every generation finds its own way to chase the Beale treasure. And today, that chase has expanded into the realms of artificial intelligence, satellite mapping, and advanced cryptographic science. Yet despite all this progress, the treasure remains hidden, a ghost of gold that continues to lure those who dream of being the one to solve America's greatest secret. Drive through Bedford County, Virginia, and you'll find rolling hills, deep woods, and winding country roads that seem to guard their own stories. To most, it's peaceful countryside. But to treasure hunters, every patch of soil could be the hiding place of unimaginable riches. For decades, men and women with shovels, metal detectors, and ground-penetrating radar have scoured this land. They've searched caves, farm fields, creek beds, and rocky ridges. Some have claimed to find traces of disturbed ground or iron containers buried deep below the surface. Others insist they've uncovered small clues, rusted nails, fragments of tools, or peculiar stone formations that might mark a long-forgotten vault, yet none have produced definitive proof. The legend has inspired expeditions large and small. In the 1960s, organized teams used primitive magnetic scanners and hand-drawn maps in an effort to narrow down the area described in Beale's decoded message. In the 1980s, when computer technology began to rise, cryptographers and hobbyists turned their focus to the numbers themselves. They ran digital analyses, seeking patterns or repetitions that might hint at hidden structures. Each new technology brought hope, but no success. The treasure hunters of the digital age soon learned what the adventurers of the past already knew. The Beale mystery is a puzzle that refuses to yield. Even with today's supercomputers, the codes remain unbroken. Data scientists and AI researchers have tried to feed the ciphers into machine learning models, hoping that advanced algorithms might detect linguistic or statistical patterns invisible to human eyes. Some programs have simulated billions of combinations, comparing the Beale numbers to every major English language text in history. Others have explored unconventional approaches, musical patterns, mathematical sequences, even ancient ciphers from other cultures. The results are fascinating but inconclusive. The first and third ciphers still refuse to speak. Yet the search isn't only digital. Across online forums and YouTube channels, modern treasure hunters trade theories, maps, and calculations. Some believe that the first cipher doesn't point to an exact coordinate, but rather a description of landmarks, a mountain, a stream, a boulder, that only makes sense when viewed in person. They spend their weekends hiking through Virginia's countryside, tracing old trails, matching landscape features to historical documents. Each small discovery, a piece of old iron, a collapsed tunnel, a pile of stones shaped like a marker, fuels new speculation. They're not just chasing gold anymore. They're chasing connection, adventure, and the satisfaction of uncovering something that has baffled the world for centuries. Meanwhile, professional cryptologists continue to study the ciphers from an academic standpoint. Some have noticed mathematical consistencies in the number groupings, suggesting that Beale may have used more than one layer of encryption. For example, if the numbers represent letters based on a key text, but those letters are then rearranged through a separate cipher, the true message could be almost impossible to reconstruct without both keys. Others think Beale may have used an original text, a personal journal, a poem, or even a Bible with unique spelling and punctuation, meaning the real key could have been lost forever. Despite the endless analysis, the mystery thrives because it straddles the line between logic and legend. Historians visit archives searching for any trace of Thomas J. Beale, any mention of a mining expedition or sudden disappearance in the early 1800s. Cryptographers dissect every number, every spacing choice, hoping to find meaning hidden in the structure itself. And treasure hunters? They keep digging because history has shown that sometimes the unbelievable turns out to be true. The Beale ciphers sit perfectly in that space between history and hope, where skepticism meets faith. As technology has advanced, so has the mythos. Drone mapping, LiDAR scanning, and 3D terrain modeling have entered the treasure hunter's toolkit. These tools can reveal depressions and underground anomalies invisible to the naked eye. Some believe that with enough funding, an AI model trained specifically on Beale's writing patterns could one day find the missing link, the linguistic rhythm that cracks the code. But until that day comes, the ciphers remain a wall of numbers that refuse to yield to human or machine. There is also the strange human side of it all, the way the Beale mystery pulls people in and never lets them go. Over the decades, countless seekers have dedicated their lives to solving it. Some have spent their life savings digging in forbidden areas, trespassing on private property, or vanishing into the woods for weeks at a time. Others have lost marriages, jobs, and reputations chasing this dream. The Beale treasure doesn't just promise gold. It promises meaning. For many, it represents that elusive hope that somewhere out there, beyond the reach of ordinary life, something extraordinary still waits to be found. And yet, perhaps the most haunting thought of all is that the treasure could have been discovered long ago. There are rumors, quiet ones, that someone may have deciphered the code in secret, unearthed the gold, and left without a trace. There are stories of mysterious strangers showing up in Bedford County in the early 1900s, men who paid their debts in gold coins of uncertain origin. But no one can prove it, and maybe that's the beauty of it. The mystery endures precisely because there is no closure, no certainty. It remains open-ended, eternal, the perfect riddle. In today's digital world, where information is instant and mysteries rarely last, the Beale ciphers stand as a defiant relic. They remind us that not everything can be solved with data, that some secrets are meant to test our curiosity rather than reward it. Every number on those fragile pages represents more than a clue to treasure. It represents the human spirit of exploration itself. The endless hunt continues not just in the hills of Virginia, but in the hearts and minds of those who refuse to stop searching. For over 2 centuries, the Beale ciphers have stood as one of America's most enduring enigmas, a blend of legend, logic, and of transcends time. From the moment Thomas J. Beale allegedly buried his treasure beneath the Virginia soil, the story has woven itself into the fabric of American mystery. Every generation, from the gold dreamers of the 1800s to the digital codebreakers of today, has tried to uncover the truth behind those cryptic pages. Yet the treasure remains hidden and the code remains unbroken. The Beale Papers are not just about lost gold. They are about the human pursuit of the impossible. They challenge our intellect, our patience, and our belief in the unknown. Historians, cryptographers, and adventurers alike have poured their lives into cracking this riddle, searching for that one missing piece that might reveal the key. And even with the world's most powerful technology, artificial intelligence, and endless collaboration, the mystery continues to guard its secrets as if it were alive, aware, and determined to remain unsolved. But maybe the true treasure isn't buried in the hills of Bedford County. Maybe it lies in the chase itself, in the spark that drives people to seek, to wonder, and to explore. The Beale Ciphers remind us that history still holds secrets, that even in our modern age of instant answers, there are puzzles that defy explanation. They are a mirror reflecting humanity's endless curiosity and courage to dream beyond the ordinary. So whether the gold exists or not, the Beale Ciphers have already given us something far more valuable, a story that refuses to die, a riddle that binds generations, and a legend that continues to whisper across centuries, daring anyone bold enough to try and break its code.